But that's okay. We're going about as well as the Crows did on the weekend, so my apologies for that. But you should all be up and running now, I think. And let me know in the next couple of minutes if you still can't see us. Four Eyes Billy and Tones. It should be coming on YouTube now. Should be there, Tones and others. There we go. It's just hooked up now. So apologies to those on YouTube. A bit of a weird start. Probably a start almost akin, Macca, to the Crows themselves. They didn't turn up. I want to ask you a little bit later when we get into it whether the opening round fixture had anything to do with it, because I think it might have.
Yes, you've got a lot to say about that.
Yeah, well, I just it's too much of a coincidence that all the teams that played first up in opening round also had good wins this week. But look, you know, it is what it is, I guess, and here we are. Look, I haven't got any graphics tonight, so you guys are just going to have to listen to good old-fashioned audio. I've got Macca covered up there. There you go, Macca. Sorry, see, it's all happening. All right, let's go through the round one results first of all, Mac. And the Blues, 12-14-86, got up by 5 points over Richmond, 12-9-81. Probably closer than I would have expected, to be honest.
Well, actually, the Tigers actually led for the first three quarters, and which I thought was a really top effort by them, because they lost players early. In fact, they lost three players to injury. Preston did his hammy very early. Gibcus did his knee very early, and then later on, can't remember who it was, somebody got concussion, and they were down to only two interchange players, and that's where Carlton managed to get on top of them and only just got them towards the end of the game. So, you know, the Tigers were a massive improvement on the previous week. And as I said, they were very unlucky to lose all those players. I still think they're going to be one of the not so good teams this year, but they're obviously a bit better than I thought they were after round 0.
Richmond, you think will be one of the lesser sides?
I think so.
Okay. I think so too. But they certainly, I think they performed above their expectations. So they, you know, not disgraced in that regard.
No, far from that.
All right. Next up, we had the Swans comprehensively beating Collingwood, 102-69, 33 points.
You know, if you really want to go early and say who you like as a flag favourite, and after round 1, Sydney made a very strong case over the two games they played in round 0 and round 1.
You were all up for the Giants last week.
I haven't gone off them either. So I've got two contenders at so far. I mean, they may change as the year goes on, but if you just go by what we've seen early, Sydney was very comprehensively. But they beat the Pies easily. They didn't just win; they beat them easily. And you know, they made if you look at what the Pies have got, they've got some very weak spots in their team. It's been a credit to them to win a flag. It's just amazing, really. But you know, what's worth them is the Sydney's with sort of a bit of a makeshift midfield, because they've got three midfielders out, but. Feeney, along with Warner and Gooden, well, they started, but pretty well. They played very well all around the ground, and Collingwood just looked very, very ordinary. Now, I'm sure they can play better than that, but gee whiz, they've got to improve a lot to be considered to be a grand finalist again this year. I'm thinking they won't be.
Yeah. Who are you saying is not going to be a grand finalist?
Collingwood.
Oh, that's a big call, Mac.
They haven't shown much of their two games, mate.
Mate, how many seasons of football have you watched, and how many times have you seen those teams that have played deep into September just start off a little bit slow?
Look, that's very true. And you're quite right. And I may end up with egg on my face, but I'm going to have a lash and just say I don't think they will.
Okay. One thing I did notice about the Pies is they couldn't connect with their forward line at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
They just didn't seem to have any sort of fluency, and their Mychek was playing quite high, and Cox wasn't giving him a target, and I didn't really like. They looked all over the shop, but yes, far too early for mine to be.
In fact, I think they only really won 3 positions. They won both the ruck positions. Grundy got a toweling by those Collingwood rucks, and and Dacos, of course, he's outstanding. He's just a star. But I just didn't like the rest of their side much at all.
We'll see. All right. The next one was the Giants. North weren't disgraced in this one. The Giants 17-19, 121, 39 points in the end over North 13-482. No,
a very, very, very a long way away from being disgraced. I thought it was a very good effort by them because I do think the Giants they're definitely like top 4 material and possibly a grand finalist material. In my opinion, they've got a very, very classy side when you look at some of the players they've got. Tom Green was absolutely outstanding, 39 possessions. I mean, the guy's he's a star, absolute star. But, then he's got blokes like Canelio and Kelly backing him up. So, having said all that, I thought to North Melbourne's credit, they've got some players on the rise. I mean, what's his name? McKercher playing his first game. I thought he played an excellent game. He's going to be very, very classy. I liked him. I thought Zeri was outstanding in the ruck, and Sheasel will. I wonder, could he continue on from where he was last year? Well, he certainly can. He was very good. So look, they've got a lot to look forward to. They're not going to play finals, but they're going to be not so easy to beat this year.
No, I don't think they're going to be easy to beat this year, Mac. They've got enough. They've got, like we've commented before, that their midfield is pretty good, to be honest. Not a lot wrong with it. They just lack a little bit in defence, and they're probably one short up forward, I'd say.
Yeah, it's a good summary.
Certainly not the worst. Not the worst at all. All right, the next one... Cats getting up in the end by 8 points, 76-68. I only watched bits and pieces of this, but I saw a fair bit of creative umpiring.
Yeah, well, I'm like you, I only saw a little bit of pieces. We had a lot of family visiting over the weekend, and I didn't get to see that much of this game, other than to see Dangerfield sealing it at the end when it was really, really close and could have gone either way. So, I can't add too much to that one.
Yeah, I think St Kilda played well in parts, Geelong's. Whenever I had it on, Geelong seemed to be getting the rub of the green. I don't know. It annoyed me.
They do down there though, at Alphabet Stadium. Yep. They do.
Then we had Melbourne getting up quite comfortably in the end, 45 points, 16-13, 109 to 19-64 over the Dogs.
Yeah, the interesting question there is, has Melbourne improved sharply or the Dogs no good? Because the Dogs sort of look okay, for the first 1 and a bit quarters, and I thought we could maybe get a bit of an upset here, but second half Dogs, they were the usual Dogs. The midfield of Melbourne was just far too good, and Gawn, he got beaten by Grundy last week, but he was going to get beaten again this week. He was outstanding. I thought Melbourne looked. Yeah, he was good. I thought overall Melbourne had a lot of good players, and for Bulldogs they relied on the skipper, but he had a very good first half did Bontempelli, but it faded in the second half, and in the second half they looked pretty ordinary. And I reckon that the Dogs won't make the finals, and their coach will get sacked at the end of this year.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about Beveridge. I mean, we've commented before on that, but I think he's on thin ice. I really do. They don't seem to be playing with a lot of system. They've got quite a bit of talent, but I don't know. They're not playing a convincing brand of football, really, and I think they've got... they've got the players to be able to, to push up, I think, but he's not got them playing well at all.
That's a good summary, Feen.
Port Adelaide today, comfortable in the end, 50 points over the Eagles. The Eagles weren't bad, but Port far too many guns, 16-24, 120 to 10-10, 70. Could have been a lot worse if Port had kicked a few more straight.
Yeah. Well, they've got a massive midfield, Port, and they all fired, and that makes it very, very hard for a team like West Coast that's struggling.
Yeah.
That was the end of it, The number one pick, he found out, but I mean, he didn't do too bad, but he did find out it's much, much tougher when you're playing for real.
Yeah. Look, and
Harley Reid.
Yeah, but I mean, having said that, I thought he did all right. I think.
Oh no, he wasn't disgraced, but I mean, I thought in the trial matches, I thought he would look quite outstanding, and he started off
just
that
goes
way,
up a notch.
Yeah, it goes up another level. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the late one that's still going, although it's almost done, Freo looked like getting over the Lions in a surprise. Lions are the ones, Macca, out of Collingwood and Brisbane, last year's finalists. The Lions are the ones that I don't think are going to be any good this year. I think they've lost a bit of drive through the midfield. At the moment, their forwards aren't really firing, and a bit thin down back. So 87-58, Freo, up by 29 points at the 28-minute mark.
Yeah, they've got a couple of injuries too, Brisbane. The guy that, what's his name? The lad that did
Lachie Neale didn't play, did he?
No, he didn't play. And the lad down back, the left footer, who beautiful player. He hurt his leg last week. Can't remember his bloody name, but no, they've got a couple of injuries, but they got beaten up at Brisbane last week, and they don't lose up there normally, so that might be an indicator of what's to come. I think they'll be around the place, but probably not as the Premier. Coleman, thank you. That was Kitty Coleman.
Yeah, look, they've been up for quite a while, Brisbane, without real. I mean, they finally made a final last year, a grand final. But yep. I don't know. I reckon they might be just about done. Anyway, time will tell. It is early, and if we're going to apply that filter to Collingwood, we have to apply it to Brisbane as well. Deep into September. So round 5 or 6 is probably when we start to get a bit of a read, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, Pete.
All right. Now, the latter means Jack, but this... I hope they never do this opening round again, Macca, because I think not only does it make the ladder look stupid and it won't right itself for weeks yet, but I honestly think that it's given a leg up to a few teams. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's absolutely that. Look, the whole they can't call it a draw. The whole fixture is a disgrace anyhow. The way it's done, and Victorian teams always getting the better of everything. But this is just madness. It's just giving 8 teams an opportunity to get their form up and. What's that? Where's that coming from?
Well, it's obviously coming from one of my screens that I've got open. So let me just find which screen that is.
Oh, that's touch and go.
I don't know where that's coming from. Where's that coming from? Oh, it's over here. I've found it. I found it.
That's good. Yeah, what I was going to say, those teams have got an absolute leg up because they've played and they've whatever flaws in their game they've been able to tune that up. They've got another one under their belt there, so they haven't got the anticipation of the first game. They just feel a little bit better about it. So it gives them a big advantage, and then on top of that they get an extra bye as well. I mean, so the whole thing is just absurd. It is absurd. There's nothing. Only the AFL could come up with something like this. It is bloody stupid.
Yeah, I'm not a fan at all. I think this, it's almost put an asterisk on the season. That's how much of an influence I reckon it's had. because it. Look, anyway, let's not go on about it. It is what it is. As it stands, with Freo not included in this at the moment, but they'll go up to 8 points and probably a decent percentage. But we have the Giants on top with 8 points and 143%. Sydney second, just below them on percentage by a couple. The Suns a couple below them, also on 8 points. Carlton on 8 points with 103%. Freo will probably go above those. And Freo will probably end up top because they were 160% before this week. So they will probably, I reckon, sit on top of the table after this. Essendon...
Well, they can't. Because teams won 2 games.
Well, Fremantle will have won 2 games too.
No, they didn't play last week in the round 0.
Well, why has the ladder already put them in front? Maybe it was a running score. No, this ladder's weird. Anyway, all right. Essendon on 4 points. Even the AFL can't get their bloody ladder right. It had them winning already at 50. Oh, because it's a live ladder I copied. That's all right. So anyway, Fremantle will be up there as well. Essendon and Melbourne rounding out the top 8. We have Geelong also with a win. But outside the 8 on percentage, then the Crows, St Kilda, Brisbane, Hawthorn, Richmond, Collingwood, North, Western Bulldogs and West Coast Eagles. But like I said, it means jack because stupid bloody opening round.
Yeah, and what I don't like about the AFL, and it is a stupid idea, and the majority of people think it's a stupid idea, but they pat themselves on the back and say, yeah, everybody likes it, so they will do it again next year. No, they like it, so they think they'll do it again next year. But you ask the average punter does not like it.
No, that's right. And look, did they really gain that much? I mean, they had decent crowds for that opening round, but I think they would have got those crowds anyway, to be honest, Macca. And I don't think they gained much at all. They didn't really take advantage of the NRL Las Vegas round because they didn't play that week. I mean, it's
just crazy. It has. And, as you said, any game that they might have would have been minute and certainly not worth buggering up the whole competition. I think they're mental up there. They're mental.
Yeah. All right. So just a reminder for those on the Discord chat that if you want to have your say, and there might be a few people with a bit of an opinion, go ahead and have your say. Similarly on YouTube, if you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and have your say. Now, Mac, on YouTube, we have finally. Now, Mac, on YouTube. Whoops. Hang on a minute. What's going on here? We have finally. Now, Mac, on YouTube. There we go. We've finally hit. Yeah, I know, it's an absolute schmozzle today. I don't even want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it, Macca.
You've had 5 finally.
Yes. I just don't want to talk about it. But on YouTube at the moment, we finally hit enough subscribers to be able to switch on a couple of features that we haven't had before. One is channel memberships, which I haven't activated yet because I'm still wondering whether we should actually do that. But the other one is super likes, I think, or super chat or something, which means that if you want to donate a little bit of money to the cause and get your comment standing out, you can go ahead and do a super like or a super chat or some bloody whatever it's called, super chat on YouTube and pay a couple of bucks and I'll read out your comment on YouTube, which I've just turned on there. So I'm undecided whether I want to switch on memberships. I want to do something in that regard, but I want to know whether it's something we should do via Discord or via YouTube. So if you've got an opinion on that, you YouTube watchers, let me know in the comments, and we'll have a think about it. But in the meantime, The Discord channel users, if you want to have your say, go ahead, raise your hand, and we'll get you on board, because I'm sure that there's lots of people that want to talk about the disaster that was our round one game. And it was the Suns 8-12-60, only 6 points in the end, Macca, 8-6-54 to the Crows. But really, apart from 15 minutes, we were never in the hunt.
Well, a lot of players have got to look in the mirror and have a good look at themselves, because I don't know what they thought they were doing. I mean, things like, for example, if you really want, it was so putrid. Things like Smith kicking off from a point and fall back and neatly putting it on the opposition's chest so they can have a set shot for goal. Stuff like that. 4 days, getting the ball. Had enough time to turn around and kick it. Does a wild handball to nobody. Straight to the opposition, they kick a goal. And, I mean, it was the lowest standard you could possibly hope to get out of an AFL team, in my opinion. It was disgraceful. I mean, there were blokes that really burst their guts, and Rankin in the first quarter where he was bursting his guts. Crouch burst his guts all day. And there was a couple others that did as well, but gee whiz, there's some blokes that really stood out as being very, very ordinary.
Well, let's start at the beginning, because I think that it was predicted for at least 2 days, probably longer, that it was going to be a wet night, right?
Yep.
That was going to happen. And we commented last week that the standard, no-brainer change up in the forward lines with Tex and Riley out was to bring in Burgess and Gallant. But there would have been a good case to go small and to challenge them at ground level. And what did we do, Mac? What did we do?
Well, we went tall.
We put Burgess in for his first game in wet weather. He was a non-entity, as you'd expect, because pretty much every big man on the ground was a non-entity for the game. So I'm not having a crack at Burgess at all. He was just not suited to the conditions, just the same as everybody else that's over about 6'6". But we subbed with Jake Saligo, Macca. Now, what the hell? Lockie Murphy, and we'll go through individuals in a moment. Lockie Murphy, I think, had 7 or 8 touches, was completely ineffective. I want to know what Lockie Murphy, what role he had in the game, because I couldn't see what he was trying to do.
Well, I can't answer the question for you, because I couldn't work out what he was supposed to be doing either. He had a bit, very magic leadership. Yeah.
No,
Why they put him in the leadership squad, I can't buy that he's in the leadership squad, because he's such a bloody marginal footballer in the side. So, and then he proved that he was Murphy was good at Cromania. I agree with you. Look, he was ordinary, very, very ordinary, and if that's part of the leadership group showing in that example, it's not a great example, is it?
Well, we had Murphy and Smith, the 2 seniors in that group that were on the ground, and I think they were both putrid. Neither of them showed any leadership whatsoever, in my opinion.
A lack of.
Look, I've said to you already, Macca, that I'm concerned about this coach and the way he selects the team, and the fact that we are sticking with players at the expense of younger players. And I think it was to the detriment of our development last year. And here we are again. And if he's not careful, he's going to go down with the ship with these old blokes.
Well, my point is, and I did post this on Twitter at the time, at halftime, that that was possibly the
I think you've got me
worst
blocked
time.
on Twitter. I can't see your Twitter.
You can. I haven't got you blocked.
I'm just joking.
But,
Go on.
but the point I made is, really, it was just bloody horrible. And as far as I'm concerned, just hold the ink on that contract for the coach at this stage. Don't sign it yet. Nix has got to prove a little bit more than he has so far. I mean, he's been okay as a bloke that's taken them from the bottom to where they were. Possibly should have been a top 8 side last year, but I'm not convinced yet that he's the man that's going to take us up further. And I know it's just one game. It's one game in isolation, but if you took that as if you're going to judge whether you signed that contract with him on that game, you wouldn't sign it. You wouldn't sign it.
Well, aside from the selection, in my opinion, was poor. And he took far too long to get Saligo onto the deck. I mean, it was 11 minutes into the third quarter, I think, before Saligo came on. And he had an immediate impact on the game. You could argue that one of Burgess or Gallant would have been sufficient, and you probably would have gone with Burgess simply for the second ruck chop out. But,
yes.
But it just... I don't understand that. It seems to be a consistent theme with Adelaide coaches that they're just belligerent in system and continuity, and they don't try anything. They don't think outside the square. There's no creativity in what they're doing. There was nothing. I mean, the only thing that they did was push Berry up on Matt Rao. And basically just crowd him. He's still got 20 bloody clearances anyway, so that was no use. And to be honest with you, Berry was better when he was playing as a pure mid. To be honest with you, I think he was far more effective when he was actually able to play his position. And this is what I mean. We are sacrificing players, Mac, in stupid situations and not allowing them to play.
Well, on that game, you would, Berry had played such a great game the week before, but gee, that was I know what he was asked to do was the impossible to try and stop Rao, and it actually upset his whole game. Berry, and unfortunately, he did drop that mark at the end, towards the end too, but I'm not judging him on that.
It wasn't an easy mark, that one.
No, I'm not. As I said, I'm not judging him on that. It's unfortunate because it was hard, but yeah, what he did, he sort of almost played Berry out of form a bit by just making him do. That's not his natural instinct. That's not his natural game.
No, he's a ball hunter. That's what he is. I mean, you could have probably made a case to, if you wanted to shadow Rao, you could have made a case for someone like Ben Keys, but...
Well, that was one I was thinking. I should have been doing it. I would have had Keys there automatically.
The other thing that we talked about last week, Macca, was making sure that, I didn't mind beefing us up at the coalface, but we needed to make sure that we had enough run on the outside to be able to extract the ball and get some run. And the exact opposite happened. And we'll go through team stats in a minute, but one thing that will stand out to you is the differential in uncontested possession. And the two beneficiaries of that was Noah Anderson and Sam Flanders. And if you have a look at that game and you see how Sam Flanders and Anderson played, they were the perfect outliers, right? They were the perfect outriders. They were just off the contest. They were on the move. And we committed, at various stages, we committed, 3 or 4 players to the contest. Really, the only two cold-faced players that Gold Coast played all day was Took Miller and Matty Rao, who got the majority of their clearances. And if you have a look at Anderson and Flanders' uncontested possessions, they were the prime movers on the outside. And we failed to... Yeah.
35 possessions each, Feen.
That's right. We failed to recognise that. We failed to do anything about it. And more to the point, we failed to do something similar ourselves. It was like this propensity for hustle bustle is not good enough. It's not going to stand up in modern football. We've got some quality on the outside. I thought Rankin started the game particularly well through the middle. But where was Chase Jones? Where was Lockie Smith? Where was Lockie Murphy? These outside runners. Geordie Dawson had an absolute howler of a game. Absolute howler, and he didn't handle the conditions at all, and he didn't seem to be getting out of first gear to the extent where I was actually wondering whether he was bloody carrying something. But we did not set up correctly. And Damien Hardwick did. He had players behind the ball. He had players outside of the congestion as receivers, Anderson and Flanders in particular. And that's how they were able to get the ball forward.
Well, yeah, exactly. And as you say, but Anderson and Flanders, they got so many possessions where there was, we had ball hunters just chasing the same ball, and they had players. And this has been a weakness in our club for a long time, Feen, and I thought we were starting to get away from that last year, but this was a terrible start, because this was going back like about 2 or 3 years where we all go hunting in the middle and leave the others outside. It was pretty terrible, pretty ordinary, and I think like the coaching, the coach he's supposed to make the change. He's supposed to get the players to do what he wants them to do, not to just to do what they want at will, rather than playing a team game or a structured game. I just couldn't work out what his structure was even. I just couldn't work out what he's even trying to do. I just thought it was terrible.
Yeah. Look, our forward line was continually congested because they are very, very good at getting back under Hardwick. They always had blokes not only back but behind the contest, so between the contest and the goals. That's basic footy, right? In wet weather footy, you get between the contest and the goals, because nothing's ever clean. And the amount of times they were able to clean up out the back and get a nice clear run out of defence because they had those players. On the other hand, our midfielders and our wingers didn't push back hard enough often enough, and they often had. If you had a look at where their goals came from, it was generally a player that was free floating down from the midfield.
Yeah, a lot. It happened a lot.
All right, look, let's have a look at the team stats. And again, I must apologise. I had a fair bit of footage and all that queued up, but my computer decided to say no. So we're going to have to do it old school today, Mac. So Suns disposals 366 to 359. Fairly even, 139 handballs each, and 227 to 220 kicks. Inside 50s, we actually won, but we were terribly inefficient going forward. We didn't have any connection whatsoever. And to be honest with you, those saying we missed Thilthorpe and Tex, I think Tex might have made a better go of it than Darcy, but to be honest with you, I think it was just the way we shaped up. Although I did have some footage queued up of early in the third quarter, Macca, of Darcy Fogarty that I wanted to show you, and it's a real shame that I can't bring it up. But there was a piece where there was a throw in at about the 50 on the half forward flank. This was in I reckon it was the third quarter, and the ball ended up coming out and sort of being kicked into the forward pocket and going out of bounds. Fogarty's positioning was like completely wrong. It was completely wrong. And the ball actually went where Fogarty should have been. And I wonder whether Darcy knows where he needs to be in certain situations. You would think that a professional footballer with all those coaches around would have drilled into him where he needs to be in certain situations. But in that particular instance, and a couple of other instances as well, he was just in completely the wrong position. And I think it hurts him. I think positioning hurts him. It's not work rate. It's where he puts himself, in my opinion.
Well, he only had one quarter where he could actually say that he was of value. In the third quarter, I think he had most of his touches in the third quarter, actually. Barely sighted in the first, second, and last quarters at all. But I think if you have a look, I don't know how many touches he had overall, but I think he had 6 at least in the third quarter, and I don't think he had much more than that overall.
Yeah, it wasn't much. We'll go through the individuals a bit later, but I just wanted to point that out. Overall, our connection into our forward line was just terribly average, and wet weather football is not hard. There's only certain places you need to be. You need to be in front. You need to be directly in line between the contest and the goals. There's no point being side on, and you need to be able to create space, and we weren't able to do it. Hit outs 40 to 50 in Crow's favour. I thought O'Brien did pretty well against Witts under the circumstances, and I thought beat him around the ground, to be honest, although neither had a huge impact. Clearance were even, 43 each. Centre 9 to 8, stoppage 34 to 35. I actually think our coalface players did really well. I thought Crouch in particular was clearly our best. Clearly our best. I thought Berry, when he was allowed to play the role, did really well. Led slightly less, more inconspicuous, but we didn't get thumped in clearances. It was what happened next, comparatively. You know what we did with our clearances compared to what they did. The amount of times I saw Jordan Dawson kick the ball around his body because he didn't seem to have the pace to be able to break through. It was very unusual for Dawson. And there were one or two others as well.
Yeah, if you watch it again, you'll notice that he was pressured all game. They actually made a point of not allowing Dawson to get a lot of free and easy kicks, and as a result of that, he did a lot of scrubber kicks, whereas normally his kicking is pretty precise. And they target him out as a bloke who can use the ball very well, and they certainly neutralise him quite a bit.
Yeah. So contested possessions 156 to 166 in our favour, but uncontested possessions 196 to 167, Macca, and I think that's actually the tail of the tape. That stat right there indicates why Gold Coast won, in my opinion.
Sorry, what was that stat? The 196.
Uncontested possessions 196 to 167.
Yeah, look, but they worked harder than we did to make space. That's as simple as that.
Yep, exactly. Right there. That's the ball game, in my opinion. As I said, out of stoppage and in general play, they did work harder. They worked back more. They provided more options coming out of defence. It was a dirty game. It was slippery, wet, raining like hell at times. But they worked harder than we did for 3.5 quarters. Turnovers, we turned it over a little bit more, only about 5 more than them. Everyone was turning it over like crazy. Mark 64 to 50, and that's a knock-on effect of the uncontested possession count. Mark's inside 50, 8 to 4. Again, their ability to run into space into their forward line gives them more opportunity to mark. Contested marks are relevant. Tackles were even. To me, it stood out that they were working harder, and I think to everyone watching it you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to see that we just weren't working hard enough, and it's hard to understand a team coming out in round one, Macca, of a season that you're expected to push up the ladder against a team that is probably going to be your nemesis for the next 5 years. We're on a similar development path, and come out like that on a night like that, particularly when it's wet, which is a leveler. It probably negates the home ground advantage, in my opinion. I just don't understand how you come out without a work rate.
Well, and nobody can argue with what you just said, because our work rate was not necessarily of all players, but there were certain individuals did not work hard enough, and you only need 2 or 3 near the contest that don't work hard enough, and that's just enough to do you in. And look, Saligo showed that. So once Saligo came on, he brought on energy, and that energy then seemed to transmit to the other players around him. And we were playing a different type of football in the last quarter, and it was all Saligo inspired.
It was. Pedler also, I think, he had that knock, friendly fire. I think it was Gallant that headbutted his nose, and that took him out for probably about 15, 20 minutes, and probably took him a little while to recover from that. But I like Pedler's game, except for his shot at goal, which was the subject of the first round goal kicking challenge, which occurred this afternoon, mate. And mixed results. I've got to say. Mixed results. I actually had a kick without a discount because the polls that I ran on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and anywhere else, Discord, all they decided on a 20% discount, distance discount, Macca, for mine, which I was happy to accept. Well, I was happy to accept. I pegged Pedlar's shot at about 30 metres. Do you reckon that was about right? 30 metres out?
Yeah.
Yep. I took my first shot from 30 metres and did exactly what he did. Missed it to the left. But then I took my discounted shot, which is the one that really counts, and straight over the goal umpire's hat, mate, from 30.
Look, at AFL level, that has to be a lay down there. You have to kick those. You can't miss those.
McGillis said I needed to kick it on the left. Initially, when I rocked up, I intended to kick it on my left as a bit of a showboat, McGilla, but what happened was that I realised that my hamstrings were 56 years old and that I hadn't kicked a ball any distance on my left for a number of years. And considering I was filming it, I didn't want to go down in a screaming heat. So,
How did the hammy go?
No, hammy was fine. A little bit tender. Mike would have been touched on the line. Look, there wasn't anyone on the line. If there was someone on the line, I would have kicked it further, Mac. You know that.
No doubt about it, mate.
Baxter, it was Colonel Oval.
I was thinking you might kick 60 metres, mate.
Yeah, no, it's going to take a few weeks for me to stretch my hamstrings out a little bit. So anyway, that's on YouTube if anyone wants to have a laugh. But I thought Pedlar, apart from that, it was a really unfortunate miss. At that stage of the game, we really needed something, and a professional AFL footballer should be able to kick that without any trouble at all.
Now, Feen, I know that you're not in your youth, but with Thilthorpe down, there's on the injured list, there's a long-term injury list. There's a space there for you, mate.
All right, moving on. All right, look, I have to say thank you not only to the 80-odd viewers on YouTube, Macca, but we've also got nearly 90 viewers on Twitter at the moment, which is fantastic. So good day to everyone who's watching us live via the Twitter stream. Baxter said should come down to the Mitcham Hawks Oval, though. I reckon they were playing cricket there, Baxter. We searched for a couple of ovals. I was going to, because I'd gone down and played some basketball with my lad at Springbank, and we were going to use the oval there, but they were playing cricket finals. So Saturday, Sunday games. Maybe next week. Mitcham Hawks being my old home ground, Mac. I should get a little bit of home ground advantage, but Colonel Art was fine. Anyway, all right. So so as I said, if those of you who are watching on YouTube, if you want to support the channel, I had a fantastic donation last week from a listener. What was his name? Dominic, I think, which was very well appreciated. So thank you very Daniel. That was it. Daniel Jackie on the chat. Thank you very much for that donation. If anyone else wants to contribute, I need a new light. I lost one of my lights, Mac. So any donations go towards that. All right, let's have a look at some individual stats, shall we? Because they prove interesting reading. Matty Crouch, obviously, I thought was our best. 33 touches, 13 kicks, 20 handballs. Kicking efficiency was a bit down at 38%. Kick to handball ratio obviously was up a bit. Rebound. The difference with our midfielders though, Matt Crouch and Rory Laird, who both were our mainstays at the Coldface, along with Sam Berry. And if you have a look at the Suns, is their metres gained? So Matt Rao, nearly 500 metres gained. Miller, 350 metres gained. And then you had Flanders and Anderson on the outside. Flanders at 488. Flanders at 488. Anderson on 633. You compare that to us, Matty Crouch, 330. Rory Laird, 284. We just weren't getting enough drive out of those players. And for Matt Rowell and Took Miller to still, rack up 450 odd metres gained, it's pretty damn good. YouTubers should be able to see Discord comments, Vardy, because they should feed in, unless it's not working properly.
Just on Matty Crouch, one thing I'll say is I was amazed at times how much time he seemed to have. Compared to everybody else rushing and to get their kicks, and he could have perhaps done a lot better with some of those positions. Although in fairness to him, you've got to have somebody to kick the ball too, that's willing enough to work hard enough to make a space, and that wasn't very, very often, I might add.
Yeah, no, look, it's he's such a strong player. Matt Rowell's got shoulders like Martin Leslie. He's so square across his shoulders. Remember Martin Leslie?
Yeah, I do remember Martin Leslie. He actually looked like he had coat hangers hanging at each shoulder.
Very strong, very, very good. We didn't seem to be able to take the arms when we were tackling. They were seeming to be able to get their arms free quite often, whereas we were kind of shoveling a bit. We couldn't really get arms free, but we just couldn't get the ball out in space. We didn't have players in space to receive. Everyone was getting sucked into the contest, and Rao was actually able to use the ball effectively out of clearance and usually hit a running player or a player in a better position anyway.
Well, yeah, but their midfield was so dominant though, Bean, that's one that 35 possessions to each of two, and then 29 possessions each for each of the other two. So that's a hell of a lot of possessions, and they had they only need a little bit of movement up forward, and then they got an opportunity to pass the ball off. We just didn't have that same luxury because we were beaten overall. Look,
Crouch and Laird had 63 touches between them. Dawson still had 26 touches, which I'm quite surprised about. But then our next best possession winner was Josh Worrell at 22. We had Lockie Scholl with 21 relatively ineffective disposals. We had Brodie Smith with 20 relatively ineffective disposals. And then it drops off a bit. Isaac on 19. Miller, I thought, didn't give us enough drive off halfback, 19. I thought Hinge returned to some sort of form at 19 touches. But we just didn't have enough run through those those contests.
Oh, can't argue that. We were just we didn't have any run all day. They had run all day, and that's why our defence, which is a fairly relatively inexperienced defence, was under pressure all the time, because the ball was just coming in there quickly, whereas. We didn't have the same luxury up the other end. Every time we went there, we were kicking to crowded packs most of the time.
Yeah. And that's because we were basically up and down the line, whereas they were spreading a little bit. They were able to change angles a little bit, even in the wet conditions. They were able to get a little bit of width, whereas we weren't able to get any width on the ground at all. We were playing very, very tight in and just sort of rushing forward. Brodie Smith, just quickly, Mac, another piece of footage that I had queued up that unfortunately we won't be able to see, and I reckon it might have also been in the third quarter. There was a moment in the third quarter where he got the ball across half back, and I think it was a feed out handball from a stoppage, and he had a Gold Coast bloke in front of him, and he ended up handballing relatively wildly into the centre, and it got turned over, and it resulted in a Gold Coast score. The thing that struck me about that was that Brodie Smith 2-3 years ago would have put the afterburners on and got around that bloke, and he just doesn't have the confidence, he doesn't have the pace anymore to be able to do that, and that's why he's kicking around the corner so much, or giving these handballs that just are get out of trouble handballs, not constructive. I thought, look, if Matthew Nicks doesn't realise that some of these blokes need to be shuffled out, then it's going to be to his detriment in my view, and Brodie Smith is one of those.
Well, he's also in the senior leadership group. So, whereas to me, I'm in the same boat as you. We should be gradually phasing this bloke out because he's never been great at finding a teammate with the ball. He's happy to do the 50-metre bombs, but you just mentioned one where he directly gave away a goal. I mentioned one previously where he directly gave a goal, and like two goals from just absolutely unnecessary acts or poorly performed acts when there were goals at such a premium. I mean, you could say he lost the game.
Well, look, there's only a goal in it. He has been a very good player for a long time, although I've always been of a mind with Brodie that in big moments he can be a bit flaky. But having said that, he's almost 250 games for the club, etc., etc. But I don't think he's part of our best 22 anymore. And the problem with playing a bloke like Brodie Smith or playing a bloke like Lockie Murphy is that we don't get the opportunity to see the next bloke develop. We've got young Nankervis, who I think is a ready-made replacement for Brodie Smith across halfback.
He is.
We've got Zach Taylor in the twos. We've got the young lad Edwards, who surely will push up after a few weeks. To be, we haven't seen enough of Lockie Gallant, and to me, Lockie Gallant now plays like someone who every time he gets on the ground, he wants to try and impress because he's getting limited opportunities, right? So there are players like that, when we just have to think about the future as well as the now, and even the now playing blokes like Scholl and Murphy and Brodie Smith, etc. I don't know what it actually gives us.
Well, they fill positions. That's about what they do. But are they going to take you somewhere? No, they're not. They're not going to take you anywhere. They might actually work on a day, one particular day. Most days they won't add all that much. In days gone by, Smith probably had some good games, but I don't know whether that necessarily. Murphy has an odd one here and there. Scholl is almost just a non-descriptive type of character who gets the ball occasionally, and they're not players. They're not premiership type players.
No, I feel like Lockie Scholl is the type of lad that would look fantastic at training. Because he's a good mover, he's got a silky kick, all the rest of it. He'd look fantastic at training. Very polished, you're right. But in a game day situation, he's just not effective.
No, he used to be almost faint when somebody came near him physically, and he's got a lot better than that now. But not overbrave, but he's at least not squibbing it, but. But yeah, as somebody says in the chat, he doesn't hurt you.
No, he doesn't hurt you. I don't think Lockie Murphy hurts anyone either, really. I mean, we all are quite happy to talk about Murphy's courage, and no one ever disputes that. But if you're going to be on the ground as a small forward or as a high half forward leading up, you've got to get more than 7 or 8 touches, Macca, surely. There's particularly on a night like that. Ready-made for him.
Yeah, tailor-made for him. And he should have done a lot better, but how the hell he got into the leadership group is beyond me, because to me he's always been a marginal player.
Yeah, I agree. I don't understand it. Look, let's keep going with a few individual stats. Isaac, I thought, played very well, Mac.
In our best.
He had 19 touches, 11 and 8. I only went at 54% disposal or kicking efficiency, but as I said, wet night, you live with that. He had 320 metres gained, 7 inside 50s, 12 contested possessions, 8 uncontested possessions. So he was in around it, 9 ground ball gets. I just feel like he was he was he got a little bit lost, I think, in the second half, but his first half was outstanding in my opinion.
Well, he was probably BOG at half time, and as you say, he got a little bit lost in the second half, and Crouch kept going and took the honours for the Crows. But he was still high up there, and he probably might have still been our second best player.
Yeah. What'd you make of Rochelle? I thought early Rochelle was extremely disappointing. A couple of very soft efforts, half tackles, didn't seem to be running at full pace. And I think in the last quarter we saw the type of player that Josh Rochelle is, quite a mercurial player that can, get involved very quickly. My problem with that, as much as it was great to see him step up in the last quarter and kick a couple of goals, my problem with that is we drafted him at 6, Mac. We drafted him to be a player that will eventually be part of our midfield rotation. Will he ever be that?
No, I don't think he will. I think if he could get some consistency and perhaps a little bit more intensity, he could still be a top-notch player for us. But more, I like him closer to the goals because he can kick a very good goal, which a lot of other players won't. And like he got 3 goals on a night like that, which was good, but he was almost non-existent in the first half. So. I think he will be a very good player for us, but he's just got to work harder and more consistently.
Look, that said, Macca, he only I don't think he really got much of a run through midfield through the rotations. I think he probably only got 1 or 2 centre bounce attendances. I don't know the number, but
3, I think.
But what we've seen in the past is that he's actually not a bad clearance player at centre bounce, and the fact that, again, we weren't able to break free and get any sort of drive, from the contest, it would have been worthwhile, in my opinion, actually getting him involved a little bit more.
I agree. But I think we played, we were coached very unimaginatively, if you get the word out, all game. So I thought we made a mistake at selection, and then we made mistakes with the way where we put people.
But and this, I guess, is we will never know whether Rash is going to step up as a midfielder if we don't give him the opportunity. And this, I guess, is my point. We won't understand how these players can play unless we actually give them opportunities. And to continue to play Luke Pedler predominantly forward, Jake Saligo predominantly off the ground, Sam Berry playing a negating role running in off half forward, Nankervis not getting a game, Lockie Scholl continually selected, Lockie Murphy continually selected. We are not giving opportunities to our next generation. I saw someone write something today that kind of I knew, but intellectually, but it's still, seeing it written shocked me. I think we've drafted, of the 13 players that we've drafted in the first round in the last 10 years, Mac, and not one of them is in the midfield.
I know, and I was actually thinking about that the other day, that when I see all these guns at number 1 and midfielders, when we have number 1, there's no midfielder there. It's out of every other team that has had a top half a dozen pick or a top 10 pick has been able to snaffle a midfielder. And we don't have one. Not in the last, I think it's 10 years. 13 players in the last 10 years, not one playing first choice midfielder. Which isn't a great record.
It's actually a horrible record. It's a horrible record.
Yeah. And somebody in the chat quite rightly says, didn't we draft Jones, Gallucci and McHenry to midfield?
Well, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, Bobby says Edwards will be that player, but he's in the 20s. That's what I'm talking about. it's getting to a point now. Even I mean, I'm not going to argue us taking Riley Thilthorpe with our first pick in that draft season, but even he's a bit of a mystery. Is there a ruckman? Is he a forward? Is he a hybrid forward? Is he a running forward? What is he? Whereas Logan McDonald, who I would have preferred to get, you can see what you're going to get with Logan McDonald. You're going to get a bona fide forward.
Well, I must admit my name was down for Logan McDonald. I'm not sorry that we got Thilthorpe, but I'm looking at what now that Logan McDonald doesn't have to worry about getting that forward position. I think he's going to boot on to be a very good player.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we're reaping what we sow, and, we've given Crouch the opportunity. And look, no one can doubt Crouch's value in this game. The conditions were perfect for Crouch. But we have Crouch, Berry, and Laird in that rotation. And, yes, we were calling for that last week because of the possible conditions, but we're not complementing that. In the first quarter, I actually thought in the first quarter we weren't too bad at stoppage. We were loose around the ground. We weren't working hard around the ground. At stoppage, we were actually quite good with Rankin doing some good work. But what is it, Macca? Is it class? Is it speed? What is it? I don't understand.
Well, we don't have that. I mean, Rankin's doubling up as he was doubling up as that class midfielder for the speedy breakaway in that first quarter, and I thought he did it pretty well. But we didn't really actually draft him for that. I mean, we drafted him to be like a menacing forward who would occasionally come up there. As it turned out, he spent nearly all that first quarter and other parts of the game on the ball, because. If you have a look at the midfielders that Gold Coast have got, Anderson, fast, play and makes he can go well inside, but Anderson, he goes outside.
Anderson should have been ours. Because Gold Coast got a freebie.
Yes. They've had a few. Sanders, he can play outside. Miller can play outside as well as inside. So, we've got insiders, but we just don't have a class outside.
Yeah. Dylan on the YouTube chat makes a very good point. The ball came out of our forward 50 too easily, and that was a feature of the game. And this is, I guess, my criticism of blokes like Lockie Murphy, who that should be his bread and butter, keeping the ball in the forward 50. And the amount of times the ball went into our forward 50 and came straight back out again, you lose count after a while. And I don't know. It's extremely frustrating to wait all pre-season or all off-season, all pre-season, have a reasonably good hit out against Port Adelaide. We're very competitive against Port, etc. And then to surf that up in round one, not only from the player's perspective, but also the coach's perspective, I don't think we've taken a step. And I don't think the coaching staff are evolving this squad, Macca. And I think it's going to be their undoing.
Well, as I said, I did tweet at halftime that just hold the ink on that contract. Just let's have what happens in the next few games. Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. 100%. Followers of the CrowCast channel on YouTube will see a video come out probably Wednesday where I go through a bit of the Knicks thing, and I'm not sold at all. Historically, he's up against it, and when I don't think it's 100% his fault, because I think our list management, when you have a look at some of the other premiership teams in the last 10 years and how their list has evolved, Macca, our list has not evolved in the same way. But having said that, it's not as if we've got no talent, right? We have got talent. And it just seems to me that our coaching staff lack the ability to make the most of that talent. We don't appear to be moving the squad forward. Yes, we should probably you could argue that we should have made the 8 last year, but the performance that we served up against Gold Coast wasn't that of a team that was hungry to reach the next level, that had been hungry all pre-season to reach the next level, and the selections and the manner in which we were coached didn't strike me as the coaching of a group of coaches that had studied in the off season and gone, all right, how are we taking this to the next step?
Yeah, I'm not writing him off totally at this stage, by the way. What I'm saying is that this is only one game, but it was a horrible game. It was so bad that you had to. It had to make you think. Well, hang on, let's not sign yet. Let's just have another look over. Let's wait another 6 weeks, Nixie. We want to see what happens over the next 5 or 6 weeks, because if you were going to hire or fire a guy on just that one game, he had to be fired. And certainly not contract extended. But, we may come out in the next 5 games, we might play very good footy. I don't know. We'll wait and see. But that's on his head to have to make that happen. And if he does, like just say we do bounce back and we play good football, well then you consider re-signing the guy. But you can't sign him at this stage until he's shown that this particular year he's got the goodies.
No, not as yet. We've got a couple of we've got royalty in the audience, Macca. I don't know whether either of them want to come on and have a say. We've got the inimitable Scorpus, the previous host of our previous show, in there. G'day, Tim. How you going? And we've also got Nuz from Sensible Crow podcast. And yes. I'm just wondering if either of those gentlemen want to come on board. Please put your hands up and I'll drag you up onto the stage. I won't force you, of course. We've spent about 3 years trying to force Vardy to come on, and we're gonna stop that now. Vardy can just sit in the chat and feed us statistics. That's fine. That's his bloody role. But Nuz or Tim, if you want to come on and say g'day, that'd be great. In the meantime, Mac, we've got to bounce back now. We've got 6-day break, and then we've got the Cats at home. We usually do all right against Geelong at Adelaide Oval. Not that we play them there very often, but we must win this game.
We have to win the game. We must win the game. If we don't, it's a very, very poor start for the season, and very, very hard to get back on even terms if you're going to lose your first home game on top of this pathetic performance. But I would be interested to hear one of the two experts out there just to see whether we've been overly dramatic or whether they agree with that, and whether they what they think is the correct one. Should we just wait? Well, obviously we will. We will just wait and see. But to me, that's just my opinion. We can't re-sign Nix at the moment. We have to see what happens in the next 5 to 6 weeks. We've only got a sample of one. We've only got a sample of one at the moment.
Well, we've got Tim joining us at the moment, so let's say good day to him. Mate, how you going?
Hello, everyone. I don't think I have the ability to put my hand up. I've just got join as a button. So
okay.
It's always a bit awkward because I don't know where.
Oh, because you're a podcaster, so you can just come straight in. So that's fine.
Yeah,
I guess. You guys wanted me to come on. What do you want me to talk about? I haven't got any interesting opinions.
Well, I would be. Well, I'm sure you have. I'd like to know. My first question to you is, if you were the brass running the show at the Crows, what would be your approach with Nix at the moment?
In terms of his contract, I mean, I personally wouldn't recontract him just yet. I'd be waiting until at least halfway to 2/3 of the way through the season just to see exactly how he can go with the side. I think he struggles with expectations. He seems to lose a lot of games up against teams where you're sort of in the mix with us. I think Gold Coast is one of those teams, and last year as well, he seemed to lose a lot of those, teams that are in the 8 to 14 bracket. So it seems like he's a coach that we need to be seeing once the expectations start to be lifting throughout the season. We all expected us to make finals, except for the goal issue last year. So with those expectations in 2024, is he going to be a coach that crumbles under the expectations, or is he going to be a coach that can lift up the team? And I think that's very much up in the air, and he should not be recontracted until that question has been answered. The issue, of course, when you don't recontract a coach is you start to get all that speculation in the media. So we've seen Fremantle, I think, this week recontracted Longmuir for like 1 year, which was kind of unusual for a coach. I wouldn't necessarily do that, but I wouldn't be wanting to put him on like a 2 or 3 year contract and then having to sack him at the end of the year or the end of next year. We need to see how he goes.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree. And where do you think we really went wrong? Right from the word go on the weekend. Where do you think it really broke down?
So I should preface this by saying I watched live the second half of the match, and then I went back and watched the replay of the first half. So I sort of saw the disastrous first half with the hindsight of knowing that we had lost. So I think a lot of the issues, we just seemed, I don't know, not badly drilled, but badly positioned. And maybe a lack of communication across the ground with a lot of the players. It seemed like there was times when we didn't really know what we should have been doing. Like, I think you mentioned earlier players that were coming in and, 2 or 3 players contesting balls when it should have been 1. In the forward line, there was a lot of times when it'd be like 5 or 6 players in the exact same position, all attempting to do the same thing instead of being spread apart, or even just someone being at the fall of the ball. Like, you kick it long in, you don't want to have 5 small forwards all attempting a mark. You want to have at least some of them ready to, get those ground balls and start kicking goals. So I think it was a surprise to me because across the preseason, we should have been really drilling in things like structures, communication, where players should be, especially with a lot of young players. They really need to be knowing what their role is. They need to be really clear on, in this situation, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. And I think you were talking earlier about Fogarty, for example, not being in the right positions at times. And I think that applies to quite a number of players. I think that's really where it started to fall apart. And the Gold Coast midfield under Hardwick was much better drilled, much cleaner at times, but just in way better positions. And by the time we started playing, I don't know, like a free-flowing, more just do whatever we want and try and win mode, it was too late. So that's a bit unfortunate.
Okay, I agree with everything you said, by the way. Going back to when you saw the side, did you think that it was picked well, that it was the right side for this particular game?
I mean, this Ligo selection as the sub role is obviously not ideal. I think it's a very safe side. I mentioned that on Big Footy. I think we selected it based on preseason form and, what players had done. And, as you can see, it's a very experienced side, one of the more experienced sides that we can produce, really. And it seemed to be selected in a way that sort of, I don't know, it hinted to me that maybe we think the rebuild is more advanced than it really is. There's not a lot of imagination or risk-taking there. We've got all of our draft picks from this past preseason. They're all playing Sandfall. I mean, you could argue whether Curtin is ready to go or not based on injuries and whatnot. But, some of the players that we saw at the end of the last year, like Nankervis, he's sort of been relegated again. We elevated Scholl. I'm sure he's great in the preseason, but didn't we learn the lesson last year about what Scholl provides? So I've always been a bit critical of his side. Matthew Nixon is, preseason amnesia. Like, he sort of forgets a little bit what some of these players provided the previous season, and he just goes on, I don't know, how good they are in the preseason. And I just don't think we're ready for locking in the side yet. Like, we're just not quite at the stage where we have a 22 that should be settled. There's still a few experiments that need to be made, some players that need to come in and see what they can do to see whether the 22, there's a better 22 that we can field, potentially from some of the players like Curtin, Edwards, Nankervis. We haven't seen Zach Taylor at the level yet. So there's still a few things I would have liked to see, but it's very safe is what I'd say in general.
Yeah. It's exactly, Tim, what we predicted last week. We had the discussion about what would be the predictable selection with Tex and Riley out, and that's exactly how it transpired, and it's completely inappropriate for the conditions. And I think you're right, except what I think happened halfway through last season when we got a sniff of the 8, I think you could almost see the change. We brought Matt Crouch back into the fold. We weren't playing the kids through the middle all that much. We very much switched into look at this, we can make the 8. And I feel like we lost sight of our development path about halfway through last season. And I keep saying it, and people probably get sick of me saying it, but I feel like it's going to be to our detriment because we are not seeing what other players can. We're not seeing what Nankervis can give us. We're not seeing, what Zach Taylor can give us. We're not seeing what Will Dowling can give us. These blokes, we're happy to bring in a kid when it suits us. Like, we brought in Max Michaelani because we needed that kind of player. And so we've just played him for 22 games. And by and large, he did really well. We did the same with Sam Berry the year that his first year. We needed an inside ball because Matt Crouch wasn't going so well. And he played 22 games and had most tackles in the comp. And then we dumped him. I don't feel like I feel like the club, whether it's the coaching staff or whether it's the club, are now back on the let's make finals. And I find that really disappointing because I don't think we have the team together yet that will actually go one step further and actually win a grand final.
I think there's flow-on issues as well when you start doing things at the start of the season and then changing it halfway through and sort of reverting back to the experience thing. Like if you start playing and introducing, let's say, Rochelle and Saligo into the midfield rotations, and you're teaching them about the positioning, what they need to do, the game plan there, and then later you sort of shoving them back into the forward line or other roles, or as we've seen, sort of trying to bring Rankin into the midfield, which I'm all for. I would definitely like to see Rankin play in the midfield, but is there going to be some confusion when you bring Rankin out of the forward line and now someone else has to step up into previously, I guess Rankin was sort of the number one small forward. So then there's some confusion like, what's Rochelle doing? Does he know that role as intimately as Rankin did? And then the flow on who becomes the second small forward. Pedler seems to be more forward in there. So you get those flow-on effects where, and then I think in the Gold Coast game, they sort of move Rankin back into the forward line at times, and that seemed to, things went a bit more smoothly there because maybe, I don't know, were people a bit more solidified in what the role and the responsibilities were? So if you're chopping and changing consistently and you're sort of going, okay, Rochelle's a midfielder and then he's a forward and he's a midfielder again and then he's a forward, maybe there's going to be some communication issues across the season as players aren't really, they're sort of in two minds about what to do. And I don't know whether that was exactly the reason why it seemed things were a bit weird on the weekend, but I'd like them to just, I don't know, make a call. Like, is Rochelle a midfielder or forward? Just choose one, develop him in that role, and then see where it goes. Don't get halfway through the season and be like, oh, we kind of need to go back to the old guys. I'm not saying, Crouch and Laird were, Crouch was, I think, very good on the weekend, but we need to find a way to get those other players in, I think.
Well, I think one of the moves that I would make in regards to that, Tim, is to take Laird out of the midfield and put him back to halfback and let Sam Berry be the second coalface player. I think Lairdy's done particularly well in that role with Matt Crouch during Matt Crouch's injury sort of seasons post 2017. And I don't know what we would have done without Rory in there as that coalface player, but he is he's an all-Australian halfback, back pocket sort of player. I don't think young Paddy Parnell is going to cut it in that role. We've lost Luke Brown. I think Rory Laird's probably got 3 or 4 years left in him in that sort of defensive role, and Sam Berry, if we don't start playing him every week in that role, then he's going to be a wasted talent, and it also then allows us to bring in another midfielder, because at the moment we're playing players that we know have failed us, like 2017, Matt Crouch, Brodie Smith, Rory Laird, all these blokes, they failed us, right? They didn't win. Yep. They didn't win when the chips were down. They didn't perform when the chips are down. So we have to move on from those players. We have to move on. That we've seen what their best is. We've seen what they've got to give, and we need to move on and roll over this squad. And I don't see it happening. And like I said earlier, I've had a look at the evolution of some of the other premiership winning squads, and it's quite amazing how much they have turned over their squads until they have settled on a group of players that they think can take them all the way. And I think what we do, we hang on to players too long.
I think there's a few planning issues there as well. Like, Rory Laird's 30. Like, are we seriously expecting him to be part of our premiership midfield? Like, if you think that's correct, then you must be thinking that we're winning a flag like this year or next year. Because beyond that, he's like let's say we're going to be a flag contender in 2026. Rory Laird's going to be 32.
Exactly.
Like, he's not likely to be in his prime anymore. Matt Crouch is, he turns 30 next year. So he's still got a few years left. Brodie Smith is 32 right now. He turned 32 at the start of the year. So, I mean, again, I think it goes back to the conservative selection, sort of thinking that maybe we're ahead of where we are. And I think we need to decide whether, the midfield that we're playing is quite experienced. Like Dawson, Laird, Crouch is a very experienced starting midfield. And if it's not getting the job done, then something has to give there. And obviously you're not going to drop Dawson because he's our best player. So, Matt Crouch doesn't really have another role on the ground. He kind of has to play in the midfield. And then Rory Laird, I don't know, what do you do with him? And, he doesn't play. Does he play as the sub? Is there some other role on the ground? I think people in the comments have been saying that Rory Laird's time as a defender is probably over. And yeah, I don't really know where I sit on that, because I think, as you've mentioned from other sides and other squads, is that you want your elite midfielders, the players that you've drafted to be in those roles, to be really key players by almost their third or fourth season. And third or fourth season is what? Sam Berry is currently in his fourth season, which means that Rochelle is in his third season. We've got Luke Pedler, who's in his fourth season. So
third, I think.
If you go and look at most other sides, and you look at players like Caleb Sarong and those sort of types, Tom Green at GWS, obviously Rosie and Butters at Port Adelaide, they really start to accelerate and become key components of the midfield in that third to fourth year. And if we're sort of sitting around, we're going, we've got Matt Crouch and Rory Laird in there, we want them in there because we think we're making finals. Okay, sure. But then you have to execute on that. It means you have to be genuinely contending for the flag and winning it. But if not, then something has to change there. We need to be finding out, is it Pedler, is it Rochelle, is it Berry that needs to be that next key cog of our midfield to pair with Dawson and whoever else?
Well, I mean, the thing, you look, you mentioned other clubs and their midfielders, and you look, that those other clubs haven't messed around. They've played those kids in the roles that they were drafted, and it's been a criticism of mine for as long as I can remember with Crow's squad management, is that we draft these kids and then we don't play them in the positions that they were drafted for. Sam Berry played half a season at half forward. He's a bloody inside midfielder. These players, they get drafted and then they don't get played in the positions. And I think we actually killed a couple of careers. What was the guy's name that we drafted as a mid? I keep thinking Gallant, but that's not his name.
Jordan Gallucci.
Gallucci. I think Gallucci's career was hurt badly by not being played in the midfield. Every time he did get a run through the midfield, he showed himself as a straight line player. But we never played him there. There's been a few others that we haven't played in the positions that they were drafted in, and I think it's to their detriment. And other clubs do not do that. Other clubs will play those lads in the positions that they are supposed to be playing and let them develop at AFL level. We are so scared of doing that, it's not funny.
Yeah, and you look at a side like Collingwood, and they've got, they want to obviously include probably the best player in the competition, Nick Dacos, in the midfield. So they do that, and then a player like Taylor Adams gets pushed out. He gets pushed to the half-forward line. He doesn't do a great job there, so he gets traded to Sydney.
Exactly.
Would we ever do that?
No,
I
because and
wouldn't have
Taylor
thought so.
Adams
If
was
we-
Taylor Adams was a club favourite at Collingwood. You know,
Yeah, he played like over 100 games for them.
Yep. Yep, we wouldn't do that, and that's when I've looked at the squads of the other premiership teams. That's exactly what's happened, Tim. You know, they've rolled their squads over until they've found the correct mix, and players that were doing okay in a spot were getting superseded by new players coming in that were doing better at that spot, and some of those players that got moved on were you know, club favourite players, but. What are we interested in? Are we just interested in making the 8 and see what happens, that old mantra, or are we actually looking at developing a squad that can be a powerhouse?
Look, it's a
Yeah, I
very
think
good
we're in two
argument.
minds about that.
You know, I think you guys have summed it up pretty well, really. I mean, that is one of the problems we've got, and it's an historical problem with this club. So it's not just like with Nick's this year. It's been something we've suffered from for quite some time. The point you made about Adams, I think, is a very good one, because Adams was very close to the best and fairest the year before Dacos came along, and then Dacos comes along and just pushes him out the side.
Yeah, so you know, will it change? I don't know, but I think it will cost Nix his job if he doesn't get. And I think that card's already been played. I do not see us reverting back to that development type attitude. I think that ship sailed as far as the coaching staff are concerned, and maybe the club. Maybe it's from the top down. Maybe they, like you said, maybe they think they've got the squad that they need. But well, I'm not seeing it. And you know, it's unfortunate they started playing Harry Scheinberg in the back half of last year, and he did all right until. He did his Achilles, but he was a good case in point. For the first couple of games, Macca, you'll remember, he was dog shit in the first couple of games he came back. But then they continued to play him, and he started to get the pace, and he started to get the speed of the game, and all of a sudden you started to see those traits that we saw evident in his first season start to come back again. You cannot expect a young lad to come in and deliver right at the very beginning. Even someone as good as Jason Horne-Francis has taken a while to get to the point, and he's still not Port Adelaide's premier midfielder. He's certainly mercurial, but he's not their best yet. He will be, but he's not yet. It takes time.
Yeah, no argument for me. I just think that where we all started this whole conversation is that I think Nick's has got to get his act together and do better and choose better sides than he has. And if he continues down the path that he has, well, as I agree with what everybody else is saying, that basically don't sign him up yet. Just let's see how he goes. Let's see how the size performance goes, and then we'll have a much better sample to draw from to see if he has got the goodies to take us somewhere.
Well, I think I said to you last week, and Tim, you probably agreed too, that the first 5 rounds are going to be quite telling, because we've got some tough away games. In our home games, like we've got Geelong at home, and then we've got Freo away. Neither easy games. You know, we could be zip 3. We could be 1-5 after 6. That, I think, if we're 1-5 after 6, Tim, what do you reckon the sphincter valve's going at then? What sort of rate?
Well, it depends if they genuinely haven't re-signed him or not, because you never know. They could have had the deal pretty much locked and ready to go at this point. I mean, yeah, if they start the season 1-6, they won't have too many excuses left. But I think it'll depend a lot on the side that they pick, right? Because if they go with the conservative, safe selection with experienced players in the midfield, with your Pedler, Rochelle players in the forward line and so on, and that sets the expectations that they're expecting to win these matches. Whereas if they went in and they were sort of experimenting a bit, they were debuting players like Curtin and whoever, I think you could forgive a few losses to sides like, I think we play Melbourne in round 4, for example. We play Carlton away in round 5. Those are difficult matches. And, you know, if they went with development, then maybe they'd get a bit of leeway. But I don't think they're going to have any leeway at all. I think they'll play a very experienced side, as experienced as you could get for the side, you know, the squad that we have. And yeah, as you say, if they lose those games, then I think they'll be having some tough decisions to be made.
Yeah. Now, Nuz, as I mentioned before, is in the chat. I wasn't sure, Nuz, did you want to come on, or you said your computer wasn't going too well? So if you do want to come on, stick your hand up. Otherwise, we'll you can for a minute. I'll just invite you in, Mr. Sensible Crow, because we probably need to some straightening up, I think. Come on board, mate. I've given you the flag. Is that working? You got to accept it, mate. Accept my invitation. There you are. No?
He said he was coming on.
Yeah. I've invited him, but he's not accepting my invitation. No.
What's cooking, Nose?
Well, it's there, ready to go, Nuz. So if you do find the, I think the join button's down the bottom of your screen. You might have to scroll if you're on a phone or on a computer. Otherwise, we'll just have to move on, and maybe next week, mate, we'll get you on for a second. I have to say, Mac, we've got over 220 odd live listeners tonight, which is fantastic. Might be a new world record for us, which is really good. So appreciate everyone who's participated and viewed and liked and all the rest of it. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a like and a subscribe if you're not already. It does help us in terms of the fabled YouTube algorithm, and I do want to get up to 1,000 subs if I can. That'd be nice. That'd be a nice little milestone. You just squeaked past that now, haven't you, Tim, with your channel? You may as well give that a plug.
I guess, yeah. More than 1,000. It's going okay. Whatever happens when I come onto these shows is that I always feel like I'm very negative about the club. Like, for some reason, I only come on after losses and talk about all the crap stuff. So maybe I should, instead of plugging my channels and stuff, talk about maybe a few good things that I found from the game for once.
Yeah, go on, do that.
Lost. Yeah, I mean, I'd written off Matt Crouch.
Let's finish on a high, shall we? Let's finish on a high.
Yeah, so I'd written off Matt Crouch. I think he a few years ago, I thought he'd never play well for the club again, and I think he's definitely been able to turn his career around. Playing Crouch and Laird together is probably still questionable for me, but I think Crouch is maybe even ahead of Laird in terms of the midfield at the moment.
I would agree with that.
His quality through there. So, yeah, that's a big change from a couple of years ago where it looked like Crouch was pretty much just going to be delisted even, which, yeah, if you think back to 2017 seemed very unlikely back then. I was also quite impressed with one of my favourite players, Josh Worrell. I think our backline is quite undermanned with, Keane sort of played SNFL, and we've obviously got Murray out. And Worrell seems to be coming into the game a bit better these days. Is it still played less than 20 games, but seems to be, I've always rated him. So I'm glad that he's getting an opportunity to show what he can do. He still has a few obvious, occasionally has some disposal issues and so on, but I quite like what he brings to the team. And I was also very impressed with, when we did have our comeback towards the end of the Gold Coast game, I think a lot of that was driven by our younger players who, obviously Saligo was subbed into the game, had an impact. Rochelle kicked a couple of goals. So I think that's good to see. If we had, let's say, for example, it was turned around because of Brodie Smith, then what does that say for us trying to win games in a couple of years once he's retired? It's much better to see that from younger players who you're hoping to be there for the next 8 to 10 years. So the fact that players like Saligo and Rochelle could have a genuine impact to get us into a potential winning position, even if they didn't play as well or even just not at all in the case of Saligo in the first half, I think that was a good sign that even if things are down, they can come in, play well and start impacting. And Pedler as well, I should probably mention there as well. I think he did some quite nice things, but I think you've mentioned most of those throughout the show. But yeah, I think that sort of group of players was the positives for us out of that match, and hopefully they can continue to impact in the future games.
Good point. So everyone a good point and agree with it all.
Yep, and I think that really ties in well with what we've been saying. We need to give these lads the opportunity to have an influence. That we don't want them to be bit players. We want to hand the keys to them. We want the senior players to become the bit players. The experienced heads that we're not relying upon, but can chip in when needed. And you're right, Pedler and Saligo and Rochelle, Max Michaelani down back. Those blokes were quite influential when it mattered.
Yeah.
Worrell, Mitch Hinge. So, they're the future. So you're right, Tim. It was good to see that they were the ones that actually got us back into the game and gave us a sniff.
Yeah, and I think it shows that, we've had some issues, I think, especially around the Don Pike era where we were a bit flaky. There were times when our leaders didn't really stand up, and obviously Don Pike's environment wasn't super conducive to young players coming in and doing anything. I think, that group of players who are very crucial to our success in the future, being able to, they didn't just give up. They didn't just hang their heads and go, okay, this is clearly a lost game, so we're just going to bum around and get to the finish line. I think clubs like North Melbourne suffer a lot from that, where the game is sort of lost in the first half, and then the whole group, which is plenty of young players, they all drop their heads and then off they go when they lose. But our players, they wanted to win from that position, and even if they played like crap in the first half, they wanted to get out there and turn the favours of the team around. And they took it upon themselves to do that, to do some really key involvements in the game. So if they can continue to do that as they develop experience, then hopefully we're building this culture of players that are not going to be as flaky as we saw in 2017 to 2019. Hopefully we're not going to see, as those players progress, going to Tasmania and getting beaten by 10 goals in the first quarter. So if we can avoid that as those players mature into the roles that they've got, then we're going to be in a really good position, because I think the mental side of the game was where we suffered the most throughout our previous attempt at a flag.
It's actually a really good point you make, because I agree with you 100%. I think our side through the 2014 to 2017 or 2018, I guess, era was mentally flaky. I think, you criticise Pike as much as you like, but he did at least recognise that, I think. How he went about trying to fix it was pretty dodgy, but it was quite clear that a lot of our players struggled in big moments. And whereas you're right, I don't think this young crop suffers from that. And that's where you don't mind a bit of cockiness from a guy like Rochelle, because you know that he's always going to be the bloke that wants to bob up and make a difference, to turn things around. And I think also Darren Burgess has got a lot to do with that, because I think when you're confident in your fitness, when you're still running on top of the ground in the fourth quarter and you can sense that maybe your opponent is just starting to tire a little bit, that can give you a huge amount of confidence. And I wouldn't mind betting that actually played a little part on Saturday night. And let's face it won us 2 flags.
I think that's a great point there, Ben, about the Burgess factor, because Gold Coast they had the advantage of being hardened by one game and playing then again on their home ground. This is us first up, so if anybody should have faded towards the end of the game, it should have been us. And we were just running all over them in that last quarter. If there'd been extra time, we would have won the game, because we were running on top of the ground and they were struggling at that stage. So the Burgess factor is a big factor, I think.
Yeah. So final thoughts, I guess. And Tim, I will ask you if you've got any final thoughts, and then I'll kick you off the stage. Outstage, you're welcome.
Yeah, sure. Not too many final thoughts. I think that we should be going into next week's game against Geelong as favourites. I think their Geelong side is quite underwhelming. They've got a few good forward players, like Jeremy Cameron, for example, who kicked a fantastic goal on the weekend, but their starting midfield at least, seems quite underwhelming to me. So
Agreed.
I think in the way that we were beaten convincingly by Gold Coast midfield, I don't have Geelong's midfield anywhere near as strong as Gold Coast's, which I think is going to make it a lot easier for us to win the game. I mean, their midfield is like, Patrick Dangerfield and Mitch Duncan are still having pretty significant roles, and they're
Young man,
Yeah.
young Holmes. Holmes is a good guy. Holmes is enough.
Holmes is good. They've got some good up and coming players. Sam DeConning is pretty decent down back. Oliver Henry, I rate him as a forward. So they've got some decent players there, but they're still running quite an old side. And I think that they're embarking, even if they don't want to, on a rebuild. So
Yeah.
I would definitely expect us to win this match at home, especially because our away form is way worse than our home form. So yeah, I think really if we are going to be pushing into finals or even just near finals, that beating Geelong at home is essential, and I expect us to win, but you never know.
Sadly, I was correct. I tipped us to lose this week, and that proved to be correct. But I'm with you, Tim. I think that we will win this week, and I think we could probably win by about 23 points.
Yeah, I think we're going to win, but more importantly, I think we have to win. I think losing this game will really. I think there's enough to take out of the Gold Coast game that you could go away thinking, all right, we've got some stuff to work on. But I think if you lose against Geelong at home, one up after our first game, then there's going to be some questions. And Nuz has finally found the button. How are you, mate?
Hello. Is it working?
It's working, mate. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. I'm very good. Good to be back as well. Hello to everyone. So, yeah, my computer's working about as well as my brain is at the moment. So, apologies to everyone.
Good to hear you, Nuz.
Thanks, guys.
I'm prepared to extend the podcast by about... Yeah, I'm prepared to extend the podcast for about another 10 minutes, mate, just to hear your dulcet tones.
Oh, I'll give it 5. I think the wife wants me to go to bed, and I need to as well. But no, look, let's not forget it's round 1, okay? But that first half was worrisome. At least we came back. It's a never say die. I've seen Crows teams in the past completely capitulate and give up. I think that is something that Nix has instilled. And before we, talk too much about Nix, the players do still seem to play for him. It's whether he has the nous to take us to that next stage. I think we're right to question that part. But if you look at other rebuilds, Richmond, Damien Hardwick, they lost by 120 points in the very last round of the year that they won the flag, the very next year. So what changed for them is that they got a new assistant coaches in. They got new off-field development staff and a whole, they thought Hardwick's got the players still, but we need to change some other stuff. And that's where we need to be a bit braver and not hire. I'm just going to call it out. Like people like Van Berlo, it might sound harsh on the guy. I've got nothing against Van Berlo, but is he the best midfield coach out there? Well, he wouldn't even be close. So what are we doing? We're going to become that middle of the rung if we're not ruthless. And that gets to my next point. When did anyone ever achieve anything of greatness without being brave? And that's what we're not doing by not playing, say, Rochelle, Pedler or Berry full-time midfield minutes. What's going to happen?
Here.
What's the worst that could happen if we don't play Crouch and Laird in one game?
Here.
It's almost like the coaches think the world is going to cave in and oh my God, we're going to lose by 90 points. No, we're not going to lose by that much. We have, trust your structures. Trust what you've built in these players in the last 4 preseasons. And as Scorpus was saying, like it's time for these players now to step up. Pedler's been in the system for 3 or 4 years, and you just have to look at Rowell and Anderson, literally bringing Gold Coast forward to the first finals probably. Just give them a chance. The best thing that could happen is they all get an injury, and we have to play the kids in the mid and think, oh shit, it's actually not so bad after all.
Well, and how often has it been that we've promoted a kid due to injury and he's done well? I'm with you, and I think you can get on my train on this one, Nuz, because there's enough opportunity for us to rotate all those players through midfield roles, and if they don't have the tank yet, well, you can triangulate 3 or 4 players through our midfield role. Pedler, Berry. A few of them can go through that role and have meaningful minutes without absolutely exhausting themselves. And we just would prefer to see them die on a half-forward flank.
Yeah, Rochelle, Rankin.
Yeah. Well, a lot of other very good coaches, what they'll do, instead of putting them on a half forward flank, which is the nowhere zone, they put them on a half back flank, even if that's not their true natural position, to get them the pill, because the half back flank in the modern game is the easiest spot to play. You can just run off your opponent, get an easy handball, and before you know it, you've got 20 touches. You've got your confidence up. It's happened to people like Will Day, Bryce Gibbs. There's another one I can't remember. But anyways, it's Harry
Andy
Sheasel.
Andy Mack has played some of his best footy off halfback.
Yeah. So what are we doing? Like, putting him in this horrible spot in half forward flank. It seems like we've got 9 half forward flankers. Like we should have no right to have Murphy there if we're playing Pedler and Berry and all these others there. I just don't get what we're trying to achieve long term. And I'll just finish quickly before I have to go on this note. People like Crouch is playing well, right? Laird is playing well to an extent, but in many sports around the world, in almost every sport, in basketball, if you want to use that analogy, you don't have 2 point guards. It never works. Spinners in cricket, it's just a structural thing. Warren and McGill never worked together. Are they both world-class players? Absolutely they were. Rest his soul. But it just never worked together. If we want to get to the top 4 stage, it can't work. Crouch and Laird. In the modern game, I'm just sorry. I'm so sick of having to rabbit on this point. It just won't work together. Crouch, they're both good players. That's fine. But together, no. It just won't get us to the promised land. And we need to do something about it.
Which one would you keep there?
Well, it was always Laird, but now the way Crouch is playing at the moment, he's definitely looks a bit freer with his injuries and stuff. He's kicking the ball forward. He's clearly, had to look himself in the mirror. And it seems Laird might be the odd one out. Plus, the thing about Laird is that because he can actually play other spots, that might be the worst thing for him. We know he can go back. So, it might save Crouch in that regard. But Crouch is a little bit younger. But Laird, what's he going to be, 31 this year, I think, or something like that. So it might seem that Crouch might be the one, but, we're just not brave enough to make that call and say, sorry, Laird, we need you to go back. Like, we don't seem brave enough as coaches. We still seem a bit too chummy for mine.
Well,
I think part of it is...
Sorry, I was just going to say that. I totally agree with what he's saying. That half-back thing, for example, that the other sides have used with young players very well. We should be doing that. Well, we were talking about Laird on this occasion, but, we've got a lot of young lads we could play off a half-back flank and they could do well. Sorry, back to you, Tim.
I think part of it is, we go back to the club champion results from last year, and it doesn't seem like the coaches really rate the output of some of our younger players, which I'm sure plays into their decision to not play them in the midfield. So if they're not thinking that they're playing their role well in, I don't know, a half-forward flank or whatever, which, as you said, is quite a difficult position, then they're going to be unlikely to bring them up into a midfield. So I don't know. I think that's both maybe a failure of, it's either a failure of their rating them, so they're underrating what they're bringing to the team and underrating their attributes, or they have not been successful in coaching them well enough to become good players of their role, or whatever the ranking method is for the Club Champion Award. So until they can fix either one of those things, then I think they're going to be quite hesitant to bring those players in full time into the midfield, especially if we're in the let's make finals push, and we're good enough now, so let's push it in and make finals. But I think that was one of the things I was very disappointed last year, was seeing the output of players like Saligo and Rochelle diminished, and the output of players like Murphy elevated into it. I think, did Brodie Smith finish in our top 10 BNF as well?
Lockie Murphy certainly did.
Lockie Murphy certainly did. I think Brodie Smith might have finished 9th or 10th, but yeah, disappointing.
Well, did you hear my stat? I'm not sure how many people listen to my podcast, but I came out with the stat last part of last year, and it was about Rochelle's downfall, and it was completely intrinsically linked to him playing less midfield.
Yeah.
We've got short memories in footy. Remember the Carlton game? Remember Rochelle in that game? He got something like top of my head, I don't know, let's say 400, 500 metres gained, 20 odd touches, couple of goals. He had a rip snorter, and against Port, whether it was the week before or a week after, he had a better game than Jason Horne-Francis. It was as simple as that. Look at the stats.
Do you remember Nuz?
6 rounds.
Sorry, go on, Nuz.
I was going to say in the first 6 rounds, Rochelle averaged, again, top of my head, it was along the lines of 20 touches per game. In his second season, 20 touches per game, and it was about, I don't know, let's say 10 to 15 centre bounces. Then it dropped right off, and he got lost.
100%.
Rochelle was the best ranked midfielder in under 16s for Victoria Country in the land. He was the number 1 player. He was ahead of Jason Horne-Francis. Just to remind people. So he's a midfielder.
We said the same thing last year, Nuz. The first 6 rounds were all on the kids. It was all on the kids, the first 6 rounds. And then it just all reverted back to safe, conservative selections. And, because all of a sudden the club realised that we're in the hunt a bit. And there's a few players that dropped off after those first 6. Even Rankin, if you look at his centre bounce attendances in the first 6 rounds compared to the rest of the season, he became literally a forward pocket after round 6, and I think he only had 1 or 2 centre bounce attendances after round 6. It was a complete reversion of what we were doing, and I didn't understand it then. I don't understand it now. The only thing that I can suggest is that that there's too much weight placed on seniority. And the club is too conservative with regards to playing young players. I'm sick of calling them kids, actually, but young players. You have a look at our premiership seasons. There were some young players in those teams that got us over the line. And Malcolm Blight was all about playing young players and giving them opportunities. The seniority was nothing for him. And the way some of the squads in the last 20 years that have won flags have evolved is exactly the same. They play the young players and they let them develop and they show them confidence, because not only if you don't play them, you don't see what they can do, but a bloke like Rochelle is going to get the shits on, and he will drop his bundle and he won't stay with the club if he doesn't feel he's getting the opportunities that he should be getting. Players drop their bundle if selection starts going against them, if they're not getting the recognition or the opportunities that they feel they should be, then that's very divisive as a club, and I can see that happening with a couple of these younger players if they don't start getting opportunities.
If I was a kid, a midfielder especially, I'd look at leaving, and I'm being completely putting my non-Crows hat on, whatever. I'm just thinking I'm 9th in the order, and they're rewarding, I guess, in a way, mediocrity. We know that they're going to do a job for us. That's fine, but we need to move beyond that now. This healing process, right? We know that we can play a brand of football that's good enough. We've healed the club. Thank you, Nix. Thank you, Tim Silvers. That's great. The next phase of the evolution has to happen, and we saw with meters gained and getting, what does it work out when you get 350 touches and 60 touches? That's 20% of your touches get you 400 meters gained.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that just isn't going to work. The game isn't Diesel Williams anymore, getting 29,000 touches at a metre gained. It doesn't work that way. It's completely outside based.
Yeah, the ball's moving a lot quicker these days, and I always think back to a couple of things. First of all, my interview with Hamish Ogilvie after the Zach Taylor Soligo draft year, which was, 2019, I think?
I think.
Yeah, and also a couple of interviews I did with Harry Schoenberg and a few of those. And Hamish Ogilvie was so buoyant about Zach Taylor and Jake Soligo. The Crows fans are going to love him, that we love him, all the rest of it. How many opportunities has Zach Taylor been given? And I know he got a bit injured last year, but before that his form was very, very solid. How many opportunities has he had? How did we treat Harry Schoenberg last year and the year before? why are we picking these lads in the draft and then not playing them? It's almost like we may as well not have those draft picks.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, yeah, I don't even know what we're trying to do. Clearly, there's some sort of disharmony between list management, recruiting, and coaching at the moment. There has to be, because it's not really working to the extent we want it to. When things click for us, we know the game plan works pretty well. We've got a very young defence. You know, we still need a lot of legs and games into Gallant and that for our forwards, but the forwards seem like it's not really going to be an issue long term. Tyler Wilshire's going to come in, and it always just comes down to the midfield. So we've got the players there that can take us forward. I really believe that. We might be just maybe one recruit off. I don't know, like maybe Dan Curtin could be that guy. I haven't seen enough of him to know. People say he's not quite a midfielder yet, but we're nearly there. So why the hell aren't we playing them? Just play them. What happens if we don't make the finals with the senior players in the midfield versus what happens if we don't make finals with, you know what I mean? So what are we trying to achieve?
The problem is, Naz, I think the ship has sailed. I think the time to persevere with the young players was in the back half of last season, and having reverted from that, I think they've set a path now, and I can see us being at risk of losing a few of those players as a consequence. You know, we've persisted with guys like McHenry, who's not going to be a midfielder. You know, Chase Jones, not going to be a midfielder. Could be a halfback, could be a wing, certainly not a midfielder. But we have not replaced those blokes with young players. We've replaced them with older players. You know, we've brought Crouch back into the fold. We're still playing Brodie Smith. We'll play Rory Sloane if we have to wheel him out in a freaking wheelchair, for God's sakes. You know, I mean, you know, this is what we tend to do. And it's so detrimental, So, anyway, I mean, I think we've probably laboured the point. I think our listeners probably...
brave clubs make brave choices. You know, if it's good enough for people like Nathan Jones for Melbourne, who, you know, all of the luck went against him, and Melbourne still said, no, we're very sorry, you can't do it. And you know what, Jones, he said, that's great, we're going to win a flag. You know, our senior players need to actually recognise within themselves that, shit, maybe I'm not the answer.
Yeah, or my time has passed. And that's just the way that it is. Now, Nuz, what's going on with you, mate? Are you up for a podcast this year, or are you hanging back? What's going on?
Oh, look, I'm not going to lie. I am enjoying the break to an extent. But just anyone out there, you can still contact me on Twitter. We'll still engage and chat with you whenever I log on. But it's definitely been good for my brain to not have so many different engagements. You know, I'm just concentrating on real day-to-day normal stuff, you know, making sure I'm a good dad, making sure I don't forget appointments and that kind of stuff, you know, real basic stuff. So, you know, the extracurricular stuff is still a bit harder to do, but my aim is to get back this year. I just don't know. My health's definitely plateaued and you know, we've seen a lot of issues with, you know, seeds and Brayshaw, and it's basically the same thing that I've got, if anyone doesn't know out there. And it just lingers, and you have good days, you have bad days, you have good moments, you have bad moments, and it's the unpredictability of it that is the hardest part. So, and if anyone thinks that, you know, a hip and shoulder to the head's still au fait, no, it's not. You know, you get 9, 10, 11 of the things like I have, and it just causes issues later down the track. So, you know, I'm just glad to be part of this Crows community, this podcast community, and grateful for people still wanting to chat to me and hear my voice. So, look, I'll pop on this podcast every now and then when I can. You know, tonight I was feeling okay because I didn't do much today. So, but if I have a busy day, then I'm stuffed, and I'm already borderline stuttering now. I'm having to use my all of my energy for it. So, yeah, look, we'll get there, but slow and steady.
Well, it's been bloody great having you on, Nuz. I've enjoyed it, mate.
Thanks,
Listen to you.
Yeah, you're always welcome on this cast, mate, whether it be passively in the audience and tapping away on your keyboard, or coming on for a chat if you feel like it. So good to have you on board, and get around Nuz's Twitter account, Sensible Crow, because it's a little bit more level-headed than you are, Mac.
Marginally.
Actually, can I say, just a reminder that show that I had Macca on, it was like my third highest rated show ever. So, it went,
Yeah.
Can I say, Nuds, that's because there was no CrowCast that week?
No,
yes,
no,
that
the
is
beau-
true, actually.
the
Yeah,
beauty.
come on.
No, the beauty is you had the sanity of Nuz and the madness of me. So it just went well.
Yeah. No, look, thanks, guys. I do have to shoot, but have a good rest of the cast, and I'll speak to you guys soon.
Thanks,
on you,
Nuz.
mate.
See you later,
Thanks,
mate.
mate. And also, Tim, thanks, mate, for coming on. I'll kick you out as well because like these people just bloody crowd us. Everyone wants to have a bloody say, all these bloody hangers on, Macca. But we're the stars of the show, aren't we? And we're going to finish up the bloody cast, right?
Well, I must admit, we've had cast royalty on there tonight, which is
No, it's been fantastic.
no, it really has been good. I've been enjoying just sitting back and listening to them because I have great respect for both those guys. Both of them know a lot about footy, and you and we know something about footy. We try, and I reckon we do a good job. But I think they're really great guys, and I love listening to them. So it's been a good night.
Absolutely, very good. All right, well, I think we've healed our wounds collectively as a CrowCast and Crow's family, Macca. I think we've gone through all our woes and we've talked it through, and we've welcomed some royalty, and we've had excellent viewership on the cast, both on our Discord live audience and also on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget, if you're watching on any of those platforms, give us a subscribe or a like or whatever. It really helps us along. We really value your viewership, and we hope that you enjoy listening to us on a Sunday night, Mac. But
just to say though, Pete, what it has done for me, I came on here as negative as shit, if I can say that. I was really, really down in the dumps.
After 10 o'clock, you can say shit.
Yeah, okay. And and I thought, we're going to be bloody hopeless, blah, blah, blah. But after listening to those boys, it's got me a little bit more excited. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm starting to get a little more enthusiastic. We know there are weaknesses in the coaching. We know there are weaknesses in the selection. Having said all that, I still think we can win on Saturday against Geelong.
Maybe we should rename it Weekend Therapy.
Well, it was good therapy for me because we both complained our guts out. Then we had these guys come on, and
straighten us up a bit.
Yeah,
very good.
It was good.
All right. Well, look, on that note, we're all happy and joyful, and everyone's wrapping their arms around each other. So let's leave on that note, Macca. I hope you have a good week. Everyone listening to us tonight on the live stream, I hope you all have a good week. Don't forget, if you're listening to us during the week, if you're watching the cast on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you might be listening to us on in podcast world, give us a like or a subscribe. It really does help us. In the meantime, mate, I think we're done. So
we're done.
Without any further ado, thanks everyone, and we will see you next week. Good night.
Yeah. Good night, all.